Hello, everyone. Thank you for watching this special episode of Really Dicey. This is Manny. I'm here with RJ. And today, I want to talk about something that we've been waiting for a while. How long? Maybe 10 years? Um, since we started playing Adventures in Middle Earth when it was available through Cubicle 7. The Moria Adventure Sourcebook. There are two of them. The 5th edition version is called The Lord of the Rings Roleplaying, Moria, Shadow of Khazad-dûm, and the One Ring version, same material but made for the One Ring second edition role playing system, Moria to the Doors of Durin. Both of them fantastic covers. I have to say, I've been waiting for this book for so long, and I am not disappointed.
Yeah, actually, I have always been hesitant to even have a Moria source book because I felt like I would be let down. But yeah, this is pretty amazing.
Yeah, I expected honestly this to be a typical like a module. Rooms laid out. There's monsters here, treasures here, but this is not like that at all. Wow, I don't know how to explain this book because I don't think I've seen an adventure campaign source book like this. Viewers, just to let you know that not only have we read the book, but we've actually played the book. That's how excited we were to try this out. I've done at least two sessions with the One Ring Second Edition Moria source book, and RJ, you've done one.
With the fifth edition rules. Yeah. The first thing you're going to notice when you open the book is inside you have the maps, right? Inside the cover. And that's probably the first thing you're going to spend a lot of time looking at before you even look at anything else. And rightfully so. That shows you that this is a region source book. This is not a dungeon crawl sort of source book. Think of it as a region. It just happens to be mostly underground. But there's not all of it underground. And the map is fabulous. It shows you an overhead, which is incredibly sprawling, and then it shows you a side view. So you can see the elevations of the various parts of Moria. Yeah, the map is really great. And then we get to the content.
Yes. And there are five chapters plus a really interesting appendix section in the back. Yeah, the first chapter introduction is not very long. It just gives you a timeline of what happened with Moria. If it's been a while since you've read the books, or it's been a while since you watched the movies, this will give you a great timeline of how. I mean, this Moria has been around for thousands of years. I believe the dwarves had it for 7,000, and the orcs have had it for 1,000.
It's really important to read this section on the history of Moria because if you've watched the movies, even just read the Lord of the Rings, you probably are not really familiar with the full history that's there. Some of it you get little pieces of here and there. The whole history of Moria is really, really important to the dwarves and for your dwarven characters, and is probably their motivations for going there. And there's so much things to discover in Moria that all tie back to this long history, and some of it gets touched on in the Lord of the Rings timeline.
And the second chapter, At the Gates, the Trumpet Rang, is also sort of an introduction with the emphasis on campaigning, setting up a campaign for Moria. And what I like about it is that it kind of sits you down and explains that this is not a dungeon crawl per se. This is you're actually exploring an abandoned. Well, no, it's not an abandoned city. You're exploring a city that's been besieged by orcs for a very, very long time, and it gives you reasons why you would go back there. Are you trying to find Mithril again, lost treasures? Or you just want vengeance? It gives you a lot of good ideas of why you would be there and what you should expect when you go there. It does a great job in giving you tools so that anyone that's venturing there can feel like they're in Moria, which I thought that was fantastic.
Yeah, it's really great. I mean, it all ties into the history, right? This is a point in the timeline where the Battle of the Five Armies has just happened. So the goblins have reduced their population quite a bit. And so the dwarves are wondering, hey, maybe there's not a lot of orcs left in the Misty Mountains. Maybe this is the time to retake Moria. But the king has told everybody, no, we're not going to Moria because there's something that I saw in the dark there. So some dwarves want to go back. So maybe some of the characters are dwarves that want to go back, or they get hired by dwarves that want to go back for various reasons. And you're not sure what the state of Moria is at the moment. And we're going to spoil some things for you here. But there are many interested parties who want to know what's going on in Moria and are trying to get into Moria. So there's a lot of opportunities for game masters to play up that intrigue.
There's a lot of great things about Chapter 2 that will be beneficial for players. There are new patrons. And I find it really interesting that RJ and I really like Flora, daughter of Dwaylen. As a patron, we actually used her as the patron for our adventures when we played this.
Well, because we were playing a fairly short session, I think it was 4 hours, and we weren't planning to play a campaign out of this, I needed to start the adventure in media res. So you need to have a patron already and a reason to go there already. And Flora is, even though she's the daughter of a king, she sort of wants to see what's going on with Moria. She actually believes you should be going back, but she's not allowed to. So she's looking for people who are willing to do that. Adventurers such as yourselves. So yeah, that was her motivation for the characters. I thought it was pretty easy to drop any random party into that to say, "Hey, go scout out. What's the situation in Moria? Where are the entrances and what is it guarded? What's going on there?"
I chose her because I just like the idea of someone tied into the main story in some way relative to Balin. And I just it made I felt like using her made it seem more real to the players, like oh, they were part of the story of Lord of the Rings. And then of course there's other things to help give you the feel of the game, like rumors. Some are true, some are not. It's up to your characters to kind of role play that through. What do you know so far about the landmarks or important areas in Moria? Again, this has been controlled by the orcs for hundreds of years, so information about it is starting to become more diluted and hard to find. Again, a good explanation about running Moria.
It tells you a little bit about how to run it as a game master, as far as how to do descriptions and what sort of mood you're trying to invoke. And that is really important because if you want it to have this particular mood the book is written for, you need to follow these things. It's sort of like if you're writing a gothic horror sort of setting, you follow certain ways of describing things. And this setting is a very awe and wonder, Indiana Jones exploration, mystery environment.
Chapter 3, Journeys in the Dark. Fantastic chapter. It solves a problem that I was worried about Moria. Moria is too big. How do you explore it exactly when there's no? I mean, you need like an old school encyclopedia filled of information about Moria, I think, to give it a proper to map out everything properly. So what this chapter does is that it gives you the tools so you can randomly generate rooms, randomly generate encounters. I used this as my first part of the adventure to just do random encounters and random settings in Moria, and I we had a fantastic time. We found an armory that's been ransacked. There was a group of orcs scouting about. There was an encounter, and it nearly led to everyone dying. It was a great adventure, and that was just like 4 hours in our game session.
Yeah, it's really great because so you can't map out all of Moria. It's basically Moria is multiple cities, right? So it's not just like a city either. It's multiple cities, and they're separated by long distances. And then there's different levels, and they all have a different feel to them. So there's sort of like sub regions within this region. So the way that you do it is you do it through journeys, just like you would journey in any other region. But there's some modifications to the journey charts for that. And then there's also the like, what's the danger here? How does the eye awareness work in Moria? And it works a little bit differently. I will just say that the most important thing is you don't make any noise. You make noise, your eye awareness shoots way up. Yeah, there's all kinds of random charts that you can use to generate locations if you want to. Now, there's plenty of described locations, which we'll get to, but if you need to just come up with something on the fly, then you've got some help there.
Yeah, just to elaborate more on what you said about being very quiet here, the game does give you this feel that if you make too much commotion, worse things come after you, and you don't want to be found out. This is you want to be as careful as you can coming here. If you're gonna come in like breaking down doors, looking around and causing commotion, it's pretty much gonna be the end of your characters. Chapter 4, Fell Foes, which is the bestiary section here. Again, a great job in the collection of different types of orcs, new monsters.
So they're great. Of course, you've got orcs, but you've got different factions of orcs, right? Because they're not just the orcs of the Misty Mountains that came in, but there's orcs from other places as well. And they serve different masters, have different motivations, and don't get along that well. I really like the orc faction that is basically the cult of the Doom, right? In which could be the Balrog. In canon, it's the Balrog. They're all like worshiping fire and that sort of thing. Then you've got dwarves are actually that still live in the area that have been enslaved and captured or are sort of like scavenging around. And then, of course, you've got the Balrog, which I don't recommend you ever encounter. The stats are just crazy, which makes sense because it's basically a peer of Sauron, like stronger in battle than Sauron would be. But what I did like is that there's a sidebar in this book that says, what if it wasn't a Balrog that was the Doom? Like, if you wanted to change this up on your characters in some way, here's some alternative options. Like, what if it was this or what if it was that? So it's nice to sort of explore these ideas.
Chapter 5, Mansion of the Dwarves, right, which I believe is the biggest section in this book.
Well, this is the main content of the book, right? Which is all of the landmarks that are in Moria. And there's a whole bunch. I'd say there's probably like 20 or 30. And so these are the main locations. So maybe these are places your players are trying to get to find. Maybe they're places they stumble on. And some of them are places they have to transit through, such as, the gate and the first hall, etc. If they come in through the east gate or the west gate, right? And there are other entrances into Moria. There is a tie-in as well with the Lone Lands / Eriador adventures. If you had played that with your players, that would be a great way to transition into this as well. These are really great. I love the maps. So the maps are drawn in an isometric view, and it gives you this really good sense of the space. So instead of a top down, which is just like a floor plan, you get like walls and arches and windows. And I think that's really wonderful. There's lots of external locations as well. You wouldn't expect that, but there's quite a lot of external locations. Just the idea of getting into Moria should be a big part of the adventure. And that's what we had done in the 5e 4-hour session we did. We never actually entered Moria, mostly like poked around on the outside trying to figure out how ways to get in. I really like it. It does all the normal things. It gives you, locations in that landmark. It gives you the troubles and schemes and troubles, things that could go wrong in there. Yeah, really fabulous.
RJ and I used the Dimmerl Stair as the location for our adventures. My biggest challenge in setting this up is that this is really hard to do a one-shot for, because each of these landmarks has such great history and such intricate designs. Nothing is just made just to be made. They all have a purpose. They all serve a purpose in Moria. And so whenever your players are there, yes, you can use those locations as a place for battle if you want to do something like that. But the way things are designed and how they're put together is going to make your players ask, okay, why is this here? And then start exploring and start investigating to find out what's going on. And then wonderful things start happening. But if for a campaign, that's awesome. That's what you want. But for a one shot, would have been very difficult.
Yeah, for one shot, I don't think this would be the right thing to pick up. I mean, you could do it, but then you pretty much do maybe something like the external or on the outskirts of Moria. You're not going to be going deep inside. And everything's tied together. There's lots of sub-stories happening here. It's very much a sandbox, so the game master can bring in whatever elements he wants to bring in. There's so many story hooks. The Mirror is like well described, beautifully fleshed out. The Dimmerl Stair is as well. The Redhorn Pass is also described. So you get all those external locations with additional fictions added, really fleshed out quite well. Yeah, there's one thing that 5e players should know, because 5e tends to be much more of a tactical combat sort of game. So battle maps are like very, very popular. There are no battle maps available, and nothing to the scale of battle maps is available in this book. Everything's slightly more zoomed out. So if you were planning to do 5-foot square sort of battle map sessions, you're going to have to add in some fictional battle maps of your own. You can use the sort of zoomed out versions to set those up, But generally, except for maybe some of the smaller locations, which you could kind of map one to one, but there's no overhead battle maps that are available.
And then at the end, there's an appendix. There's a at least 30 pages if you want to do a solo play of Moria. There's actually a new culture available that you can play. So you can play the dwarves of Norgrad and Belagos, which are very different from Durin's folk, where I noticed that the dwarves of Norgrad and Belagos are much more into scholarly pursuits. So if you play the 5e version, you'll notice, for example, that you'll get like pluses to like lore, than battle.
Yeah, there's also a section on Mithril in the appendix, which is really interesting because it talks about the different types of Mithril, which you never really maybe thought about before, or the different forms of Mithril and how it's used differently. Mithril does play an important part in the some of the stories that are available in this book.
There's also a section about balance expedition, which I think is great because being that we're very familiar with what happened, there's always that possibility that you don't want to break the history of Middle Earth. You can't save balance, so it gives you kind of ideas of what to do about that, how to play along with that, maybe in parallel with that in some way.
Yeah, but I'm one who always tries to keep it canon. But
Mm.
for people who like to go off canon and do their own thing, the book actually has a lot of material for those players as well, with alternate ideas for going away from canon. So
Mm.
I'm glad that they sort of support that approach as well.
Last but not least, but there are also maps in the book that you can take out, pulled out, and show to your players. On the back of it is actually something much more interesting.
Yeah, so on the back of the map, in both the One Ring version and in the 5e version, there is sort of like this battle map idea that you would use during battle and put figures on. And we can show a photo of it. Well, it basically has like rings for what stance you're in. If you play the One Ring, you'll be familiar with this idea of stances. And it's sort of a theater of the mind way of portraying battle, but sort of giving a little bit of tactical details. Now, in the 5e version, there's the same battle map on the back of the main Moria map, and it has a little bit of an explanation of how to use this stance approach in a 5e system. So instead of doing positions with 5 foot movement with squares, you would use stances to kind of reflect relative positions to enemies. And then the rest of it is all 5e rules, which is an interesting idea. This was not in the review PDF that we had gotten earlier, it was only in the physical copies. And we did try this out when we played the 5e version. I think it went fairly well. There's like special actions you can take with when you're in a particular stance. The stances are like, am I staying back away from everything shooting? Am I like way up front being a berserker? That sort of thing. Yeah, I think it was actually a great modification to 5e combat system for theater of the mind sort of play, because a lot of the rules in 5e are really written towards knowing exactly how many feet you are away from people so that you can activate different things. So yeah, I would play it again. So that's sort of like a rules modification. It's only written on the map, as far as I've found. I haven't found it in any of the text in any of the books. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I've missed it. If somebody can tell me in the comments.
So yes, in conclusion, this book is fantastic. One of the best campaign books ever. 50 people can run this, and it wouldn't be the same adventure.
Yeah, it's a really great book. I would definitely recommend this one. And finally, we have the piece that stands between Eriador and all the stuff that's come out with the One Ring recently from Free League, and the stuff that was all in Wilderland on the other side of the mountains from Cubicle 7 a few years back. So if you have the old Wilderland / Mirkwood and all of that, and now you're playing like the Eriador stuff, there's in between them, there's this Moria, and now we've got the connection.
If you're looking for one of the most like dynamic, really good campaign that at the end of it, you and your friends will be talking about it for a long, long time, this is it.
And even if you're not a player or not planning to play this as a setting, I would say for a deep lore nerd of Middle Earth stuff, you're going to really enjoy just reading this book, because it gives you a lot of things that are connected to deep lore and embellishes on them and brings them to life with great descriptions. I mean, we hear that the dwarves' cities were wonderful, right? But we don't really know what that really looks like. And in Moria, you get a sense of what it actually would have looked like in practice. The gardens that were in there, the big cistern, all the waterworks. It's really incredible and very imaginative.
The art for this is fantastic. Both covers are great. Interior art is great. It's again, it's styled just like the previous One Ring, 2E, or the Lord of the Rings role playing books are. But just again, great job.
Yeah, actually, I think this is my favorite art so far out of the Free League books in this game. I think the sketches, like the one behind me, are really, really incredible. Almost all of them are like excellent, excellent. Like I want to hang it on my wall, sort of art. The covers, I think the One Ring version of the cover is better, which is the Westgate. I think that one looks really nice, and the One Ring covers matte as well, has a nice texture to it. Whereas the 5e one is glossy, just like all the other 5e books are, and has the shadow or whatever that thing is supposed to be. It could be the Balrog, or it could be whatever you want it to be in your game.
All right, excellent. Well, everyone, thank you for watching. Stay safe out there, and we'll see you next time.